morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. This show is being recorded in Portland, Oregon, USA. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone shows where I interview interesting guests, like people like you, who are wonderful to talk to about who they are and whatever it is we've decided to talk about. And yes, thank you very much. How are you feeling right now?
Oh, great, great.
And I'm nervous.
Oh, you are?
It's amazing. It always happens, sometimes more than other times. But anyhow, we're going to have a good time tonight, I promise you. And as you know, the show goes in two major segments. The first segment is I talk to you about who you are so people can know where you're coming from and understand why you have your opinions that you do. And the second half is we'll be talking about what you want to talk about. And we touched before the camera started rolling about a few things that are important to talk about nowadays. And we'll save that for after the break and the second half of the show. We'll be going for about an hour, and that hour will fly by so fast you'll wonder where it went.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get started. My viewers have heard me talk about who I am, but I think I'll do it again for the first time because maybe you don't know very much more about me. So I'll model sort of what I'll be asking you questions about.
Okay.
I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, in the Ninth Ward. I have red, white, and black Roman Catholic parentage. On December 26, 1928. Today I am irreligious and accepting of all others. I'm a retired PhD clinical psychologist and present-day television broadcast journalist. I'm the 12th of 12 children. I'm married and am the father of 5 daughters by a first marriage. Politically, I'm a progressive populist activist, still learning how to live lovingly. A few of my heroes include Jesus, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and any other fellow human who is currently living lovingly, as I'm still working on doing. So that's me, so it's your turn.
We're all working on living lovingly.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending thing.
If I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, you can say, I don't want to answer that, or tell me to get lost or something.
Oh, okay.
And that rarely happens. And I have 1 or 2 trick questions I sometimes ask my guests to see if they're with me or something. But anyhow, if I ask you a trick question and it's too off base, just yell at me.
Okay. Or take the 5th.
That's right, you're a lawyer. But that's
right.
going to come out later on. I got to be careful what I say to you. Don't sue me. So when and where were you born, Susan?
Portland, Oregon, Emmanuel Hospital in 1949.
A native.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't.
My folks came here from Iowa to work in the shipyards.
And why were you born?
Why was I born?
That's my trick question.
Whoa. Well, Mom and Dad did the thing. I don't know.
Is there anything significant about your cultural or racial heritage worth mentioning for the viewers?
Yeah, I think so. You know, both folks went through the Depression, and my dad was a farmer's son, and they did okay, but my mom's dad was a house painter who, when the Depression hit, he didn't have much work. And so they lived really hand to mouth, and that sort of shaped my mom's values.
That's familiar to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you pick up any of that learning? That
I hope I picked up a bunch. My folks, of course, weren't perfect, but when it came to values, I think they were right on.
Do you have a religious preference nowadays?
Well, I don't call myself Christian. I'm spiritual, but it's my own personal cosmology that I don't try to sell to anyone else.
Sure. What does that mean to you, being spiritual?
Well, it kind of means being the best person I can be, and to try to, as the Quakers say, feel the God within, and act accordingly.
Yeah, that kind of fits for me too. I see myself as spiritual too. And I see myself also as a Christian with a small c, because I was a Roman Catholic kid. And Christian with a capital C may be any branch of Catholicism that's too far out for me, being an old leftist from way back.
About that, I was wondering, when you were growing up in New Orleans, did you go to Catholic school?
Early on, but I raised too much stink and they threw me out and I had to go to public school. I was rebellious from birth.
Well, you had to make your mark, 1 to 12.
Yeah, but I remember the nuns and the priests, and I looked at the priests as though they were God incarnate, you know. That was Catholic upbringing. I was an altar boy for years, and I was thinking about becoming a priest. As a matter of fact, I went to a seminary and spent the weekend to be sure that I indeed had a calling. And then I had some second thoughts, and I thought, no, there's things going on that I'm going to get tired of confessing, so I decided I won't be a priest. And talk about your education, your formal education, a little bit.
Oh, well, I went to school in Portland, public schools, and then my dear father didn't believe that women were going to do any more than have children, so he didn't believe in giving money for my education. So from the time I got out of high school until I graduated from undergraduate school, I basically took whatever course I could afford and work for, in the interim. And then I got scholarships to go to law school at the University of Houston. And that's kind of, then I came out. And I was about 39 when I graduated from law school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was late. But I had a great time up till then, because up until then I was doing a lot of social and economic justice work, living poor and having a good time.
So, any other education comes to mind that's worth telling the viewers about?
I don't think so, no.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, it depends if you want to. Probably the most significant thing that happened to me is I was in on the beginning of the neighborhood movement in Portland. And I was a part of the Corbett Terwilliger Lair Hill Neighborhood Association. And so when I was involved, we were the folks that kind of tried to control what happened at John's Landing on Macadam Avenue and
this
different
is local
places.
Things here in Portland area.
Yeah,
and this show is broadcast around the world, so we got to select where it's coming from. We've talked about something local.
What was great about that was really how loving people were, and that when we shared a dream, it didn't really matter if we were from the right or the left, because we all agreed on sort of what quality of life would be for our neighborhood, and we fought for that. And so that was probably as significant as going to college.
So you learned something special there.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Okay. And you were an attorney for many, many years.
Yes. Labor union.
Labor union?
Yes.
Oh, you're a lefty, aren't you?
Yeah.
See, I read your book. Yeah. So how many years did you do that?
Labor union work?
Yeah.
20, well, let's see, from 1988 to this year or so. Pretty long.
So you just gave that up recently?
I just retired recently.
Retired?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you've been doing some writing?
Yes.
You've written a series of novels?
Right. They're historical mysteries, and I actually wrote them for progressives and populists and people who are trying to realize economic and social justice. And I picked they're historical mysteries. So I picked the early 1900s because I thought it paralleled today.
So what went on back then is a parallel today with what's going on?
Well, I think the most telling comparison is what was happening with wealth and income inequality. And with the industrialization, there was a huge accumulation of wealth and power in the hands of a few. And the ordinary people who were actually producing the goods were basically starving, and they were dying on the job. And
so something like that
tough.
is going on nowadays.
Well, yeah, I
And
mean,
we'll get more into that in the second half of the show.
Yeah, so, but that's why. And so it's that consolidation of wealth and how ordinary people actually came out and created the greatest middle class the world's ever seen. And it was just ordinary people doing it. So that's kind of what I like
And we'll get
and
further
think is inspirational.
And we'll get further into that in the second half. What else do you do since you're retired? You go around speaking and talking to people about your beliefs?
I like to do that. I just did the Clark County Genealogical Society.
Clark County, that's in Oregon.
No, it's in Vancouver.
Vancouver, see?
Yeah.
Got me.
Yeah, Vancouver, Washington. So, and that was really fun. So I like to do that. My husband and I like to spend a lot of time in the woods, and I play guitar, and I'm trying to think, that's all I can think of. Right now I'm fighting Lyme disease, so I spend a lot of time dealing with illness. But
Really? How long have you had that?
I've had that since 1992.
Oh
and
my
I just
God.
now, this last October, got diagnosed.
And that's an ongoing battle.
That's an ongoing battle, and I could probably fill your 2 shows of yours on that issue. And I just encourage people to, if you're not feeling good, don't pay attention to the doctors, keep fighting.
You got a couple of more hours because we're going to talk about Lyme disease for an hour or so, Mr. B. No, I'd be curious about that too. Why did it take so long for them to learn that's what you had?
Well, it kind of, because they didn't have the appropriate test. And they didn't have the appropriate test because originally a pharmaceutical company developed a vaccine, and the vaccine actually gave people Lyme disease. But that wasn't discovered initially, so they modified the test so that people who had the vaccine wouldn't show positive. And then they never fixed it. They never put it back. Once they discovered the vaccine actually gave people Lyme, they never gave it back. So there's really only one laboratory in the United States that uses the proper test, and it's the one that originally invented the test.
A few words about the symptoms.
Symptoms are, the problem with Lyme is it goes everywhere. Some people, Amy Tan is an author who's pretty famous.
Yes.
For her, it attacked her frontal lobes. For me, it attacked my ears, my joints. Usually it attacks your joints, but the problem with Lyme is it moves everywhere.
In the body.
In the body. So today you'll have a symptom with your joints. Tomorrow you might have a symptom with your ears. It just goes all over.
Is there a medication for the symptoms?
No, you've got to kill the bug. You have to take drugs to kill the bug.
You taking the drugs now?
Well, the other important thing to know about Lyme disease is if you've been bit by a tick that carries Lyme, you probably have other infections as well, and I ended up having 4. So right now I'm actually killing another one called Babesia.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, no, I'm delighted because they're dying, and so it makes me sick when I'm, But it's at least now I know for sure what I have. I know what the international community, not the American medical community, but the international community has developed the protocol for it, and it does work, but it takes about 4 years.
So when you've got some symptoms going on in your body, you do some double checking and say, maybe this is the Lyme disease or something else, and then you know what to do about it.
Yeah, but otherwise, the problem with it is it's like other things that people get is you tell the doctor and they want to get you in and out in 15 minutes. And
Give you a quick diagnosis.
Yeah, and if they can't throw a pill at you, they get frustrated with you or they think it's all in your head. So that's why I say people have to just keep fighting. They know they're sick. They need to believe in themselves.
Overall, does it affect the quality of your life today in a serious way?
Yeah, right now it does because I'm under really heavy-duty drugs and they make me sick. It's like chemotherapy. It's something like chemotherapy.
Son of a gun, I didn't know that. Okay, let's move on because I could hang in there some more from my own curiosity anyhow.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity to tell people to fight because you got to at this point.
Yeah.
So.
And your partner, his name is?
George Slanina.
And he was on my show some long time ago, and I'd forgotten that until I saw him. I said, oh, there's George, yeah. Any children?
No.
Just the 2 of you?
Yep.
Any pets?
Yes, Daphne and Clancy.
And they are parakeets?
No. One's a pug, Jack Russell, not a combination I'd recommend. And the other one is a Shih Tzu Pekingese, and she's wonderful. He's wonderful too, but he's a little imp.
Yeah, yeah. How would you characterize your political persuasion? Left, right, center, or what? Are you a Tea Partier?
Oh no, I'm pretty left. I'm not afraid of the word socialism.
Yeah. Bernie's on. Never mind.
Yeah, I truly believe that we have to control greed. I think if there is a Satan, it's manifested in greed, and not that I believe particularly in Satan, but that concept of evil. I think greed is the manifestation of it. So I think we have to control that, and socialism can do that.
So I noticed you said control greed rather than abolish greed or get rid of greed.
Well, us humans, I think if you get more than three of us in the same room, eventually we'll be at each other's throat over something, and somebody will, humans, we're not perfect. We have a long way before we're Christ-like.
Yeah. Okay. Before I left home to come to the studio, I was watching the Pope and what's going on in New York and all those places, and it took me back to when I was a little kid a couple of times, and I was pretty well moved because it was just so impressive, because where he is in political and social issues and what's really important for human beings, other than the strict Catholicism and that dogma, to when I was a little kid. And my mother, I was the 12th child, I remember her, and she died when I was 14, but she was either in her rocking chair with a prayer book and her beads in her hand, because she was a very religious woman. And I thought, if Mama were here and she could see this Pope here, she would want to be there.
Yeah.
For two reasons: because of his humanity and his decency, and my Catholic upbringing too. But and I thought about it because I noticed that around your neck is very pretty.
Oh.
And I thought, now if Mama were here, she would probably have a crucifix there.
Oh, sure. we have a friend who's somewhere around 86, and she's very inspired by the Pope, and it's really kind of a wonderful thing for her.
Yeah.
Because she's one of the people that go to church all the time, and that's her community. So.
And it's important for her.
Yeah.
Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. Do you have any of those that you belong to?
No.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I was pretty active in the fight to save Portland's reservoirs. And I've actually was involved as a lawyer. I sued the city of Portland on that.
Ooh.
And so that was probably the last time I got involved. The illness sort of intruded, and my job was a very stressful, full-time job. So
Saving Portland reservoirs. Will you say a few words about that, what that's about? The Portland, Oregon reservoirs.
So Portland started, when this all mess started, before 9/11, Portland had the cheapest water and the purest water in the country. We now have the most expensive water, and they're going to be putting all sorts of garbage in it, partly so they can put other water like Willamette River water, Columbia River water, into what was pristine mountain water.
Garbage meaning additives.
Yes.
To make it safer.
No, it won't be safer. It'll just be more chemically loaded, more loaded with chemicals. And it was so when we sued because they authorized the funding without telling anybody what they were doing. And under state law, you're required to say, if I want to put out bonds for $100 million, I've got to say what it's going to be spent on.
And the government was doing this without telling people about
City
it.
of Portland.
City of Portland. Yeah.
And it's a whole, there's a whole story behind that.
Another R. Okay, Mr. Reed, one more R. And you stymied that or stopped it?
Well, the only thing I was able to do was I stopped it, and in the interim, they appointed a citizens committee of 18 experts and specialists, the Multnomah County Health guy, a bunch of other important politicals. And we did our dog and pony show, and we convinced them, all except two, that there was no need to cover the reservoirs, there was no need to bury the water, And that bought us a couple years. But as is the case with multinational corporations, they just kept coming back. And now I understand from Floyd Jones, who is really your reservoir person that can talk really well about it, that the tank that they built on Powell Butte is actually, was like, I don't know, 5 or 10 times more expensive than the same size tank they built in Seattle. And it has 3,000 leaks in it. That's what we got instead of our open reservoirs with the purest water in the country.
So they should have left the entire system the way it was working before the corporations decided to come in and make some money on managing water.
They came in to do the construction, but part of the thing is if they make it expensive enough, then the next carrot that they're going to dangle before the city fathers and mothers is, oh, well, why don't you privatize this and we'll run it for you and save you money? And I think that's one of the people involved, professor at Portland State, Charles. He actually said that's what he thought was going to happen. And Floyd found that one of the huge construction companies actually on their website said the safest investment is water systems around the world. And in fact, that's what they did in Bolivia.
Water systems around the world, the safest investment. So
Yeah.
that's, the commons is now being privatized.
You got it. All part of the Milton Friedman free market ripoff.
Watch that word, Milton Friedman.
I know, boy, what I've been reading about him, geez.
Yeah.
I think he's a war criminal. He may be dead.
But we can go up and we have to sing Kumbaya before the show is over with the same page so much. Let's keep moving on, okay?
Okay.
Any persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or look up to? Any names come to mind at all?
The people that I admire are kind of ordinary folks.
Whatever. It's personal for you.
Yeah. I worked, when I was in law school, I worked for a woman named Beatrice Mleldinka Fowler, civil rights attorney in Houston, and she was a great inspiration to me.
Why?
Because she just believed passionately, and she grew up picking cotton on the family farm, so she had that real basic feet on the ground kind of way about her, and she was extremely smart and committed.
Is she alive today?
Yes.
You ever talk to her?
Yes. Every once in a while. Actually, we just reconnected in the last couple of years. So.
Anybody else?
You know, there's just a lot of people I kind of wasn't prepared to think about it. I mean, obviously my mom in particular was a real inspirational person for me.
Why?
She came out, she drove my 1-year-old, well, my brother was 1 year old. She drove a car on the dirt roads from Iowa to Oregon by herself.
By herself?
By herself. She worked as a burner and then a crane operator in the shipyards. And she then subsequently got shoved into being a housewife. But even there, she did artistic stuff. She designed a house. She was a carpenter when she was 6 months pregnant. She and I laid a huge floor. And she was, you know, she said everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time and nobody's better than anybody else. And, you know, she was neat. She was a good person. She had problems, but she was a good person.
I can see why you would admire her.
Yeah.
I can see it in your eyes, too, as you were talking about her.
Yeah, and my dad was a businessman. He ran his own electrical contracting company. It's still in existence. And he loved the union. And I never knew that business owners were supposed to hate unions, because when I grew up, he would say the men like they were up above him. When he talked about the men that worked for him, he'd say, well, the men want this, or I need to cover payroll for the men. And, you know, there was just this thing that he had. And he was just a real decent man, and a lot of people liked him a lot and trusted him. He was real honorable.
And you kind of liked him?
I don't know. I don't know.
So people you like or admire. Now, any people you dislike are worth mentioning?
Oh, no, I mean, just the regulars.
Okay. Brothers and sisters.
I have an older brother,
Mm-hmm.
and he took over the company from my dad and grew it till it became the largest one in Portland. And then he retired, and he is also loved the union. In fact, he got in trouble because he wanted the doors out at the Portland airport. My brother installed those.
Uh-huh.
And he got in trouble because he wanted the door guys to join the electrical workers union because he loved the union. And they said he put a little too much pressure on him, and so anyway.
Maybe we'll find a reason to have a cup of coffee or something. We'll talk some more about so much and that went on in your life, went on in my life too. I was a union steward 3 times before I went back to school and became a psychologist. I drove a milk truck. In my first marriage, I had extra jobs to make enough money. And then I was a teamster, and then I drove yellow cab for a while, and then I was in aircraft for a while, and local 887 UAWCIU, and I was a union steward. I used to get in fights with management.
Oh yeah, that's inevitable.
Sire, what are you doing working on that airplane? You're management. You're not supposed to. Just a minute, let me finish this. And he's in there doing it.
Oh yeah.
So I have fond memories of the time when I was working as a union steward. Yeah. See,
Yeah.
we have some things we can talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let us take a break and catch our breath for a few minutes, and then we'll go back and talk about the things we want to talk about in the second half of the show that are important to you and that you wrote about.
Oh, okay.
Shall we take a break, Mr. E? Okay, we're back, so thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about. And tonight we'll be talking about what's important today. And my guest this evening, of course, is Susan
Stoner.
So let's continue on. Now, I'll start with a couple of basic questions, and then you can pick it up from there.
Okay.
Because you sent me a list of prompting questions to facilitate the ongoing conversation here, because you're heavy duty in the union work and that kind of stuff. So, and I didn't read one of your books, which would give me some more information about you. So let's go on. So the topic of the show, what's important to talk about on this date, September 24, 2015? What's important to talk about? Any thoughts come to mind?
Yeah, I think I can give you 3 that are sort of predominant in my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
One is, what's the role of unions? One is the book that Naomi Klein wrote called Shock Doctrine, which I think
Powerful book.
everybody should read it. It makes everything clear. It's an amazing book, and
She is amazing.
she documented the heck out of it. So you've got to trust what she's telling you, and it all fits. Somebody said it was the most important narrative of our time, and I think that's right.
Yeah.
And
You
then
got to read it if you haven't. Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing I've been thinking a lot about is I think we need to move beyond the whole equal opportunity thing when it comes to minorities in our culture. And I think we need to look at equal outcome, a more scientific approach, in that if you say, okay, a certain minority is a certain percentage in this culture, then I think that that should be reflected everywhere, that same number. So instead of 55% of the people in prison being black, if the people in the state are only 6%, there should only be 6% black in the prisons. And I really think we need to say equal opportunity, I think, is not being honest and not taking responsibility as a culture for people. So that's a thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately.
Yes, and those are all three useful to talk about. And there's probably a couple more in your mind too, but what shall we talk about from now on for the rest of this half hour?
Oh, I guess I just finished shock doctrine. And so I guess I'm pretty interested in what's going on in the world and the role of the Chicago School of Economics and Milton Friedman and the free market, and how they take advantage of crisis to come in and implement what they've wanted all along when there's a disaster. So the example she gave, that's...
And the they you're talking about are the corporations? The
yes.
Ruling elite, the super rich?
Yes. The super rich, the global corporate, whatever scheme, it's gotten to a point where actually they think that if it benefits them, then it's good for the country.
Trickle down, huh?
Yeah, and they're running the government anymore. It's kind of Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Maybe they'll have a little bit of relief from the greed of the corporations to kind of keep the population quiet, but they still want to preserve the basic control and power of the corporate. Global corporations. It's not the little businessmen that are the problem.
Right.
I mean, they're the important part of the culture. It's the huge, inhuman corporations and that are just really rampaging across the world.
What can we do about that?
Well, one thing that she points out is everybody gets sort of ambushed initially. Like, for example, Katrina's a perfect example. They had forever wanted their stupid charter school system in. And so what happened with Katrina is they wanted to privatize everything, all government services. So they privatized the response to Katrina to a point where the corporation was getting paid $178 per square foot to lay a blue tarp on top of a roof. Out of that $178, the people doing the job, 25% of them were illegal aliens, and which is, I don't have any problem with them, but I do have problems with the fact that they were getting only $2 out of $178. Now that's our taxpayer, we're paying for that.
But the corporations were making a profit, right?
A profit? They were obscene. They're obscene.
Yeah.
It's gotten obscene, and I think that's our biggest struggle as humans, is we've got to figure out how to control greed and limit the opportunity to be greedy.
How can we control greed?
Well, one of the things that she noted in her book is that in South America, of course, Milton Friedman went down and his little minions from the Chicago School of Economics, and were part and parcel of all the terrorism that went on to hurt, jailing of people, disappearing people in Argentina, Chile, Bolivia. And what she said, at a certain point, once the shock of all that they did was over, people started pushing back, and one way that they were pushing back is they're doing much more. They're not depending on the World Bank or the International Money Fund. They are depending on each other and developing local markets and developing worker-owned businesses.
Is that what we need to do in this country?
Absolutely, because otherwise, for example, if that big old earthquake hits off the coast as it's supposed to do one of these days,
And it's gonna.
I guarantee that there's going to be immediately a move to privatize our water system and privatize everything they can, and to enact all sorts of things to lessen the power of the people in the city to say what goes on, because that's how they do it.
And then the corporations, the ruling elite, make more money, and they never get enough.
They don't.
Greed. So
But the nice thing about the shock doctrine is she actually identifies who the players are. It's not like it's this metastasized greed that it permeates every person involved in the top levels of corporations. Some of those people are okay people, and if they had the right framework, they'd probably be good people. It's just some people that have managed to get the power. Your Rumsfeld, your Cheneys, people like that. And she gives their names, and she says what they did and how they benefited.
So then, who's going to win the next presidential contest?
You know, I don't know. I am glad that Bernie Sanders is running, because he is setting forth a platform that is counter to what they're doing, their free market folks are doing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's more important we all get educated than who's president. I mean, I know I say that knowing that as a union lawyer, when the Republicans are in, it's a lot harder for workers. But I'm just saying, as a world, we've got to develop a set of values, a global set of values to counter the greed. And I think that's happening thanks to the internet.
Are you suggesting that we need more regulation?
I absolutely think until we humans sprout wings out our backs, we do need to realize that there's a real tendency for us to be greedy people.
And we need to be controlled by fellow humans, and fellow humans who have the right spirit and the right thinking about being loving and humane toward each other.
Well, we're on this little rock. I mean, it's so silly. I mean, after you make a certain amount of money, what more are you going to get? What is there? And they want people to look up to them, so they're still people-oriented. But they just want to, you know, it doesn't make sense.
Don't you like Donald Trump?
Donald Trump is a joke, I think.
If it weren't so scary.
Yeah, well, you know, he can be part of the educational process. I'm stunned. I mean, Karl Rove once said that the most important thing was to get people to vote against their own self-interest. And I think
he said it out front, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He was saying that that's the goal of the Republican Party and the free marketers. They have to get people to vote against their self-interest. And those people that think Donald Trump is offering them something are fools, in my opinion.
So then it looks like the Republicans are trying to decide who they're going to run. And the question then is, will it be Donald Trump or somebody else? And then Bernie Sanders is coming from left field, and he had to be associated with the Democratic Party on paper. And there are some people who are saying we can't do Bernie Sanders because there are a few important things that he hasn't taken a stand on, like taking on the Israeli lobby and a few other important things. And some people are saying, well, that's a step in the right direction. Well, I'm pretty old, and I want to see things change more radically before I pass away in the next how many years from now. So I'm back and forth on whether I want to do a whole hog or a complete support of Bernie Sanders. And yet, it's a step in the right direction. I'm a socialist, committed socialist all my life. So I want to see things happen, make a radical change and a real difference that I can see. But what saves me, and I'm running off now, is I think about generations in the future, and there's that kind of human responsibility that we have. I didn't see the result for myself right now, but if it's things moving in the right direction, okay, let me stop. You see what I'm saying?
No, I do, and I think that human beings are evolving, And I think that we are now at this point, because of the internet especially, the world is getting smaller.
Yeah.
And we are developing a set of values where greed is one that is not going to be acceptable. And so I also think we kind of it has to change at a pace that we as human beings aren't going to abuse it. When you have the real dramatic changes like it gave us Stalin. So you have to, it's kind of like, do you want to do that old thing of the camel with the nose under the tent? And I kind of beginning to think that's the way to go. Because I've seen it in unions. Unions are the most democratic organization people can have. It is also can be the most effective response to the free market mentality. And that's why in South America, the union people were the first to be jailed and disappeared.
Yeah.
So it has that potential, but it's made up of humans and they are flawed. And they will make bad decisions and be just as responsive to demagogues as anybody else.
But overall, unions are a better alternative to the monopoly capitalist system that's going on in our country today.
Well, they're the best. They're the best counterweight to it.
Yeah.
And the best way to empower individuals. So that's I think we just have to kind of keep bumbling along. And did you ever think you would sit and listen to Bernie Sanders or anyone else talk about socialism and oligarchs in our
No.
with 28,000 other people?
So
Not in my wildest fantasies.
Stuff happens when I change that word. Yeah, you can always expect the unexpected, really. Is the American empire in decline?
I don't think the American empire exists anymore. I think that's an illusion. I think there is corporations, huge corporations. In Iraq, for example, they privatized, and the reason why so many people hate us in the Middle East is we destroyed their culture, we let their museums go, and we tried to get rid of everything, tried to put a McDonald's everywhere. And we took all of their state-run money sources and privatized it and gave it away to, the Brits, us, anybody that wanted and had enough bucks. And they all think alike.
Yes, of course.
So they're all together. So I really don't think there's an American empire anymore. I don't.
I have some thoughts that the American empire is crumbling like the French and the British Empire. There's evidence of it around the world, and there's some. What other country has bases all over the world and has the amount of military might that the U.S. has? And I think that it's fading, and like you said, the internet and those kinds of things are having some influence where ordinary citizens are becoming aware of what's really going on. And they're learning that it isn't just circumstances or something that's accidentally going on, but it's because of the greed of the corporate and the ruling elite. There is a class struggle going on around the world. And
yes.
I think the American empire is diminishing and crumbling. What I'm afraid of when it crumbles is, are we going to have something equally as horrendous from the other side? Are we going to have some sort of a benevolent socialism, hopefully, to replace the existing monopoly capitalist system?
No, they're not going to give up. I mean, right now, they're so full of hubris and arrogance. Not quite as much because they really hit a wall in Iraq, obviously, and in the Middle East. It wasn't as easy to take over as parts of South America were temporarily. But for example, I just read that a whole bunch of stuff that we think of as American is, Israeli or British. They're running our security systems in the U.S. airports. Those are foreign corporations. They all are in this together. You got a multinational corporation. They're all the same. Doesn't matter whether they say they're an American or they're a Brit or whatever. Their goal's the same and their tactics are the same.
Yeah. Shall we ask some of the questions that you posed to me to ask you?
Oh.
Shall we just go spontaneously? What shall we do?
Oh, I don't know. You made me do it.
Yes. What's happening with Palestinians, or those people that are having this difficulty with the Zionists in Israel? What's happening there? You have an opinion about what's happening between the Palestinians and the Israelis?
Well, Naomi Klein, she just makes so much sense.
She does.
And one thing she said was, when we had the Camp David Accords and the Oslo Accords, where the Palestinians and the Israelis were going to work together, the reason that sort of hit the beach and didn't work was because all of a sudden Russia was privatizing under Yeltsin, and a whole bunch of people were fleeing.
Greed is universal.
Yes, and they fled to Israel. So they no longer needed that low-wage Palestinian workforce. And that's when they started expanding the settlements. Oops. That's when they started expanding the settlements and basically going back on the idea of coming up with a solution.
Uh-huh.
So I think, and then they discovered that the war on terror and security was a bigger moneymaker than anything else they could do. So now the Israelis are in the same boat as much of U.S. corporations, making a lot of money off of the war on terror, the worldwide war on terror, and they've developed all sorts of really fancy spy stuff and things like that.
There's a war on terror, there was a war on communism, there's always a war on something in order to have the ruling elite make more money and still be in a position of absolute control and management of the entire human existence, yeah.
Yeah, one thing she talks about is Lockheed Martin. So they build the planes, they drop the bombs, and then they have now invested in the reconstruction firms and in the health in the medical field, so they can go in and repair the people that the bombs that their planes dropped injured. It's a vertical integration of disaster and war, and I think that's happening everywhere.
Shouldn't we just roll over and lay down and say, okay, I'm tired of fighting?
Well, aren't there days when you feel like that?
Not very often. Not very often. There's something exciting and fun about speaking out for there is such a thing as right and wrong, you know, and human decency, and that's still working. And
well, we have the Pope, and we have the Dalai Lama, and we have people and we have Desmond Tutu, and they're all singing from the same choir book pretty much, which is what you said, you know, other people.
Talk about kind of heroes or those kinds of people. I'm thinking about Martin Luther King, and I'm finding as the years have gone by, more and more people, left and right, are finding some reason to cite something that Martin Luther King said, and his was a model of decency. And I'm stuck. All right. You've dealt with the issue of the dishonest graft in the 1900s. Does that honest and dishonest graft exist today?
Yeah.
How so?
So dishonest graft, we all know. The policeman's paid off by the person running the whorehouse to not bust anybody in the whorehouse. That's dishonest graft. We all know that. Honest graft is when, for example, you're going to put in the Mount Hood Freeway and you're the head of the Highway Commission and you know where the freeway is going to run. So you tell your buddies before the public knows where the freeway is going to run, and they go and they buy up the real estate. That's honest graft. There's nothing illegal about that. And I think a whole lot happens in the city, including the reservoirs, that are really people doing favors, quid pro quo buddy favors for their friends and family. And so we still have that. That's still a problem, and it's why we have to have more control.
So honest graft is better than dishonest graft?
Honest graft is more insidious. I mean, one thing I learned studying the early 1900s about the city is that a lot of the people who, we have these streets with names of people who are dead, they weren't particularly good people. They were just rich people.
Yeah.
But they weren't particularly good, and they weren't good for the community. In fact, the community had to fight them. Everything that's good did not come from the rich. It came from the people fighting the rich.
Is graft okay? Any kind of graft?
No, I think graft is totally destructive.
Can we do something about it?
I think, well, I wouldn't go as far as China, where they execute people that are caught taking bribes, but certainly it shouldn't be acceptable.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt. So my fourth book is called Black Drop, and it really tracks Teddy Roosevelt. He went on a trip. He got elected, and he was afraid of revolution, and he also had some sympathy for the poor, and he also heard the steady drumbeat of the populists, and he got into office, and he thought there was going to be a revolution. So he started doing things to satisfy the population that was upset about the concentration of wealth. And then Congress was up in arms and were really angry with him. So he got himself on a train, and he took a 14,000-mile trip, and he went to all these different cities, and he talked about the trusts and trust busting, and how he didn't care what color the person was going up side the San Juan Hill, the hill when he was in that battle in the Spanish-American War.
Yeah.
All he cared about is the man would have his back, and they did, and that's all that matters. And anyway, he said lots of wonderful things, and so I learned about him, and I think he does actually belong on Mount Rushmore. And before then, I didn't. I thought he was an idiot. But he did he did so many firsts for us that, I mean, the conservation, of course, everybody knows about that. But he was the first to have a Catholic on the president's cabinet.
Yeah.
He was the first to openly consult a woman, Jane Addams, and make it clear that she was the one that was a source of ideas, and to appoint women. He did all the, John Muir and the national parks and the national forests. He was the first president to ever invite a black man to the White House. And not only did he do that, but it was one of his very first guests, which caused huge uproar when he did that. It was like, well, I won't tell you what it was because it was too despicable, but the Southern politicians were very upset.
Yeah.
And he was the first to initiate like food and drug controls.
So he did some really good things.
He did some amazing things. He was a very smart man.
Since we're talking about presidents, Jimmy Carter, I guess, has got cancer now, huh?
Yeah, I heard that.
Ex-president. And what do you think about his presidency?
I can't say I was really aware, but I always had the sense he was a very decent man.
Yeah.
And
even though he was a confirmed Christian.
Yeah, well, he gives Christians a good name.
Yeah. Yeah,
there are some out there.
How about Barack Obama? How is he doing overall?
I think he's fallen down in some really major areas, and he's done well as could be expected, and better than I could hope in others. So I would say when it comes to the treatment of people in Guantanamo, the NSA surveillance, the Arctic, drilling, he's been a real disappointment. And then the free trade, let me forget the free trade stuff.
Agreements.
Yeah, he's been a very big disappointment. On administrative levels with some things, he's appointed good people who've done some good things. I like that he recognizes that we shouldn't have so many people in prison. And I think he's, used the bully pulpit in a good way. He's a mixed bag. I don't think he's a break. I still think it's kind of, that closed circle of, make capitalism sweeter, or just let it be as rough as it wants to be. That seems to be what the thing is, and that's, I guess, why I don't even know if I would vote for Bernie Sanders, partly because I haven't heard his foreign policy yet, but I do
He's kind of close-mouthed about that because he's afraid he's talked about foreign policy. Then he'd have to talk about what's going on in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And it's a step
That
forward.
could very well be. But at least he's outside. I'm not trying to save capitalism. He's saying, you know, he's got the right focus in his stuff he's putting out there.
Well, we can go on beyond that, but time is running out, and that's a good place to stop. But I want you to talk to our viewers about anything else that you want to say, what happened here this evening, or anything else that comes to mind. But look at that camera over there and tell the viewers you got a minute or so to tell them what you think.
Oh, great. I think this is really being put on the spot. You know, I guess I would just say, just do the best you can to make the world a better place. I don't know what else we can do. And the Buddhists say it's the journey. And I think it is the journey, so.
And you're a-religious nowadays?
I don't know what irreligious means.
A-religious, without one.
Oh, right.
Without.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But I feel very connected.
Spiritual.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you came in.
All right.
And I had a good time visiting with you.
Thank you.
And we'll talk some more in the future.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Okay, I got to tell you about public service announcement. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Without the ACLU, our civil liberties would be further down the tubes than they are right now. And the way things are going in our country nowadays, with the Supreme Court acting the way that it is, we've got to protect our civil liberties. Go to that website and check out the ACLU. They've been around for a long, long time. I've been a member for 3,000 years, I think. Oh, I lost count. Anyhow. We've got to end corporate personhood. That Supreme Court decision, corporations are persons and money is speech, is goofy. We've got to reverse that. We've got to do something with members on the Supreme Court so that they vote for at least moderate positions on important issues, even if not leftist. Thanks for watching. And remember KFC? Yeah, KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind. Be friendly. Be charitable to you too. And you too. And you too. And all of you out there. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.